Do you find that you catch yourself double checking your work or redoing tasks because you're no longer sure that you did them right in the first place? These types of behaviors are common manifestations of intolerance of uncertainty. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about how intolerance of uncertainty fuels the need for double checking. Hi everyone. Today's video is another in our multi-part series of videos on manifestations of intolerance of uncertainty and ways you can build tolerance for uncertainty in your life. What we're going to be talking about in today's video is why double checking is a form of intolerance of uncertainty and how it fuels your worry and anxiety. But before I get into that, just a couple of disclaimers to go over. I'm a registered psychologist in the province of British Columbia, Canada, and this video is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute or replacement for advice from your doctor or mental health professional. Now, with those things out of the way, let's start talking about double checking. Now, the thing is, nobody likes making mistakes. We typically want to do a good job and do things right, and so to avoid making mistakes, it's common and natural to double check work to ensure that everything was done right. So in that sense, double checking is pretty natural and can demonstrate a level of conscientiousness and care about what you're working on. Therefore, double checking in and of itself is not a bad thing. However, it does become problematic and it does contribute to worry and anxiety when a person engages in a lot of double checking. Think of it as an example. Suppose you need to send an email to your boss and some other members of your team at work. You want to ensure that everything you're communicating is communicated clearly in the email and that there's little room for misinterpretation. You want to make sure that all of the spelling is correct, all the punctuation is proper, and so you double check that email. But is there anything wrong with double checking the email? Well, the answer is it depends. If the email is extremely important and it's ultra critical that you're communicating clearly and that there are no punctuation or spelling mistakes, then it makes perfect sense to double check that email. But if it's just an email about where you're meeting for drinks after work, then it makes a lot less sense to double check the email. Also, if you triple and quadruple check emails, that also starts to make less sense. And that starts to cross over into anxiety driving behaviors rather than just basic conscientiousness. So the point of this is that there's a point in which double checking things or redoing things because you're no longer certain they were done right in the first place crosses over to become intolerance of uncertainty. When you double or triple or quadruple check things that you typically do automatically, this is designed to eliminate any uncertainty in the situation and to try and make sure that what you're concerned about doesn't happen. So in the email example, by checking over the email again and again and again, it gives me a sense of certainty that nobody's going to misinterpret what I'm saying in the email and that there aren't any grammatical typos or spelling errors that could lead to people thinking that I'm a poor communicator. But would any of those things happen, especially if the email is something that isn't super important? Well, probably not, as most people, when they read an email, aren't really paying attention to the grammar or the spelling or the punctuation. They just want to get the gist of the email. So one thing you might be wondering is, so what if I double check or triple check an email before I send it? What's the big deal? If it makes me feel less anxious, and it makes me feel more confident that no one's going to misinterpret what I'm saying, isn't that a good thing? The problem with double checking things like this is that you're sending yourself a subtle message. And that subtle message is that you're not very good at communicating, and that you're highly likely to make mistakes, spelling errors, punctuation errors, or that people will misinterpret what you're saying. Because if those things weren't highly likely to happen, why would you have to double and triple check all of your work all of the time? Essentially, your anxiety is following your behavior. If you're behaving like something bad is highly likely to happen, you're going to feel like something bad is highly likely to happen. The double and triple checking things or redoing them also serves to make you a lot less efficient. If every time I'm sending an email, I have to review it over and over and over again for punctuation problems or potential opportunities for something to be misinterpreted, it's going to take me a lot longer to send every email that I need to send. So I'm less efficient and I get less work done. For what purpose? Well, the purpose is to avoid something negative happening, like something like somebody noticing a typo in an email and criticizing me about it. So if you think about it, what I'm doing is I'm trading being a lot less efficient to avoid an extremely unlikely outcome. And this is very common in the manifestations of intolerance of uncertainty. So how do you tell the difference between reasonable double-checking behavior versus excessive intolerance of uncertainty double-checking behavior? Well, the answer is there's no simple way of determining this. A large part of it has to do with a realistic and honest evaluation of the situation. If this is a casual email to coworkers about where we're going to go for drinks after work, then it's probably not something I need to be double or triple checking. And if I am double or triple checking it, that's a good indication that I'm being intolerant of uncertainty. Now, if it's a formal report to an important client, then it makes more sense for me to spend some time double checking the document to ensure that things are clear and that there are no typos or careless mistakes in it. So part of the challenge with building tolerance for uncertainty in this situation is that you have to tolerate uncertainty for the difference between what is important double and triple checking versus what is unimportant double and triple checking. And that's not always the case. It's not always easy to determine what's important to double check versus what's not important to double check. So if you relate to this, if you find yourself often double and triple checking things or redoing them because you're no longer certain you did them right, for even small, relatively unimportant tasks, and if you recognize that this is a form of intolerance of uncertainty, what exactly can you do about this? How do you change this? How do you stop this intolerance of uncertainty behavior? Well, you've already done the first thing, and that is to recognize and to distinguish that the double-checking behavior is a form of intolerance of uncertainty, and that it's not just an example of being diligent or conscientious. It goes above and beyond that, and it's being driven by anxiety. Once you recognize that you're engaging in this intolerance of uncertainty, double-checking, or redoing, the key is to focus on behavior change. Essentially, reducing or eliminating the double-checking or redoing behavior. And you can do this by engaging in behavioral experiments that are essentially tests of your worry. So let's use the example of sending off the email and talk about how we would do a behavioral experiment in that situation. What I might decide to do as my behavioral experiment is to send an email to some of my coworkers and intentionally misspell my name at the end of the email. I might do a little typo, maybe mix up a couple of the letters. So that's the behavioral experiment. That's what I'm choosing to do. The next step is to think about, what is the worry telling me is going to happen in this situation? And this is essentially my prediction of what's going to happen if I send the email with that typo. And it's important to remember, all worries are essentially just predictions. And so that's what we're looking at here. What is the accuracy of this prediction? So what might my worry prediction be in this situation? Well, my worry might tell me that people are going to notice the typo in my name, and somebody's going to comment about it to me, and they're going to comment that I've misspelled my name, questioning how smart I am, telling me that they found my emails sloppy and unprofessional. That's what I predict is going to happen when I send that email with the typo. So now we have the experiment, what I'm going to do, and we have my prediction, what my worry tells me is going to happen. So now the next step is to actually send off that email with the typo and to see what happens. This is the data collection part of this tolerating uncertainty experiment. And this is where I get to see what actually happens in the situation. By collecting the data, I'm gathering evidence which I can now compare with what my worry prediction actually was. And that's the last step, comparing what actually happens to what my worry predicted was going to happen. And this can give me a sense of how accurate I am, or how accurate my worries are at predicting what's going to happen. Now, in this scenario, chances are I send off the email and no one says anything about it, because even if they noticed the typo, they probably would have just assumed it was a typo rather than a sign of my lacking intelligence. So nothing bad actually happens when I send the email. And if you do these types of behavioral experiments and you find over and over and over and over and over again that what you predict was going to happen doesn't actually happen, then it tells you that your worries probably aren't very good predictors of the future. And this can lead you to start questioning how necessary and important it is for you to constantly double and triple check things to ensure that no mistakes are ever made. And as a result, this allows you to be more efficient, less self-conscious, and more confident in your abilities, because you're not always checking to see if you've made a mistake. So these behavioral experiments around not engaging in double checking, this can be very powerful to help you overcome intolerance of uncertainty. The other thing you can do to take advantage is to take advantage of naturally occurring opportunities to tolerate uncertainty that come up on a day-to-day basis. So, for example, if I'm pretty sure that my appointment was at 1 o'clock, but there's a small part of me that thinks that the appointment might be at 2 o'clock, rather than double checking the time of the appointment, I can just decide to show up at 1 o'clock. Worst case scenario, I arrive an hour early. But the exercise reminds me that I don't have to double check everything, and that I can sometimes just rely on my judgment. To help my clients remember to be doing this regularly, I encourage them to imagine the following question tattooed to the frontal lobe of their brain. And the question is, if I were more tolerant of uncertainty, what would I do in this situation? And what you'll find by filtering your world through this question is that you'll see lots of opportunities to tolerate uncertainty and not engage in double checking or redoing behaviors. So I hope that gives you a better understanding of why something seemingly so conscientious and reassuring like double checking or redoing something is actually a form of intolerance of uncertainty that can fuel and maintain excessive worry and anxiety. And as a result, it's important to remember to not fall into the trap of double checking or redoing tasks just because they give you a temporary sense of relief knowing that you haven't made any mistakes. Because oftentimes you won't find any mistakes anyway. And even if there are mistakes, it's usually not that big of a deal, and you're likely to manage the mistake just fine. I'd love to hear any thoughts or ideas you have about this, so please leave me some comments in the comments section down below. If you've been enjoying my videos and would like to see more, please hit that subscribe button and notification bell, and you'll be alerted every week when I post a new video. So that's all for this week's video. As always, thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video, and I will see you in the next one.